I'm Jess Harris with CE Floyd. In today's episode of Industry Tidbits, we'll be discussing a relevant topic, and it's something that's affecting all of us: extraordinary cost increases and material lead times. Let's build on this.
Welcome to Industry Tidbits, presented by CE Floyd, with our host, Jess Harris. Your go-to resource for today, tomorrow, and the future. Here, now.
Welcome to today's episode. I've got two amazing guests here today. First, I have Mark Beckler, Director of Estimating at CE Floyd. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Jess. Thanks for having me. It's great to see you again. I'm excited to get into today's topic, all the escalation and lead time issues. You know, lots of people are like, yikes, what should we do? Hopefully we'll give them some good tidbits and help them.
Awesome. Thanks. And that brings me to our next guest. Coming to us from DC, we're talking to Ken Simonson, Chief Economist for the Association of General Contractors. Ken, it's great to have you here today. Can you give your audience a little background on yourself?
Sure. AGC is the leading national construction trade association. We have over 27,000 member companies, general contractors, as the name Associated General Contractors of America suggests, but even more subcontractors, suppliers, and service providers. They belong through a network of 89 chapters nationally. Some are statewide, some are vertical only, some horizontal only, some represent specific metro areas. And as chief economist, I try to provide information about what's happening in terms of materials costs, labor availability, and market segments.
Awesome, thank you. So we're going to jump right into this. Ken, we've seen that you report each month on the federal government's producer price indexes for construction. The latest data stated that input costs rose 19.1% from April 2020 to April 2021, but bid prices have only gone up 2.3%. Should this alarm owners?
Yes. It may sound like good news for owners that it's not being passed through in current bids, but that widening gap, as my first slide shows, indicates a huge problem right now for contractors. It's going to show up in future bids, that contractors can't go on absorbing this huge gap in what they're paying for materials and services versus what they're putting forward in bids. It also represents a threat to the viability of some contractors who locked in prices a year ago, and now they're seeing the input costs soaring for so many different materials.
So Ken, are you expecting to see big change orders come through, potentially contractors going under? What do you foresee specifically happening?
Well, it very much depends on what materials they're buying and how important those are as a percentage of their whole cost. So my second slide, if possible, is even more alarming. What that shows is that from April of 2020 to April of 2021, we had incredibly steep increases in producer prices. That's the price at the producer, the sawmill, the distributor level for things like lumber and plywood, almost double. Steel mill products and copper and mill shapes up by 40 to 70%, and even plastics and gypsum wallboard, other kinds of inputs having double-digit price increases. These aren't even the latest figures. The Bureau of Labor Statistics based those on prices collected around mid-April, and by mid-June, many of those have gone up even more steeply. So again, if somebody is buying a whole bunch of lumber and that's all they're doing, they're really going to be stuck with incredible increases, or steel. And I'm not one to predict what contractors will charge in pricing, what their change orders will look like, but I know something has to give. And I hope it won't be a company going out of business. I hope that owners will recognize that these are exceptional circumstances.
Okay, and now Mark, what are you seeing happen with the costs on our projects at CE Floyd?
So just kind of reiterating what Ken said, everyone knows about lumber, steel, gypsum products, but we're seeing a few other materials go up as well. Rebar has gone up 200% in the last year and a half. Polyiso insulation is creeping up quite a bit now. But other wood materials like wood doors and millwork products are also climbing. So we're running across it as well. We had the unique opportunity with a recent project that got put on hold at the beginning of the COVID season, and we just redid the GMP about 18 months later, and it's gone up 9.3%. So that's really right in line. It was a lot of the material prices, and it wasn't in every trade, but it was in some of those larger trades like steel and drywall that we saw some bigger bumps, as opposed to some other ones that kind of held consistent.
Well, I think an even bigger problem, if it's possible, is the supply chain. That I'm hearing that if you're ordering a kind of bar joist now, you may not get it until next May. Roofing material, anywhere from 4 to 6 months. So this suggests you can't get a project out of the ground, or worse, you've put up the frame, but you can't cover the project and finish off the interior for an entire building season.
We're trying to do a lot of pre-purchasing for our materials. When we hear about something, we're letting all of our project managers know, so they can stay on top of it and make sure they're letting the owners know. And a lot more is going into pre-con right now.
And Ken, as you know, we're in Bedford, Massachusetts, and Middletown, Connecticut. So we're in New England. You're looking at the whole country as well. So are you seeing larger increases in certain regions of the country? And if so, where?
For most products, they're sourced nationally, or at least the producers may be located nationally, their competitors may be. So they pay a lot of attention to pricing in different areas. And also, some of these price increases have been exacerbated by tariffs. We've had a long-standing tariff on Canadian softwood lumber, for instance, and President Trump put on a 25% tariff on steel from many countries. Others agreed to quotas, which make the supply even more difficult to obtain, and a 10% tariff on aluminum. So those things are affecting prices nationwide. In addition, there are a few things that are very local. For instance, concrete or cement and aggregate. Those are so heavy and low value that they do tend to have regional differences. But there's nothing that I would single out that makes the market in New England unique.
Okay. Let's talk about disruptions in the construction industry. So we've seen a flurry of them within our industry, and they've led to a dramatic rise in material costs. What are a couple of the major cost hikes over the last year that you've seen?
Well, I think the one that's gotten the most media attention is certainly lumber, and that's a real problem for home builders, but also for restaurants or other businesses that may be adding decks, railings, or doing interior remodeling, where lumber tends to be a higher percentage of the cost than on new construction, because you're not building in excavation costs, steel framing costs, maybe not elevators and HVAC equipment. So the lumber takes on bigger importance. But as Mark mentioned, steel of various types, including rebar, has had incredible increases. And we had this big jump in price and availability problems for all types of construction plastics. Polyiso was mentioned, and vinyl vapor barriers or insulation. All of those and many others were affected by the freeze in Texas that shut down a lot of the plants that produce the inputs for construction plastics. I think that situation may start to improve. Those plants are supposedly back up and running. But my third slide shows that these problems can persist for a very long time. The red periods on this graph show a period in which the cost of inputs, specifically the goods that contractors are buying, outran the increase in the change or the change in bid prices, in this case for warehouses. So from 2010 to 2012 and 2016 through 2018, you had these huge, long periods where contractors were absorbing major price increases and not pushing them through. And that does suggest that the contractors could be facing these problems for a long while again.
Okay. And Mark, what are you seeing in our region?
So we're definitely running across these problems. Ken started out with lumber, right? And we've had a couple of different instances where on one project, the truss supplier walked away from the sub that was going to be doing all the wood framing on the job because they couldn't afford it. And luckily, we have a great working relationship with that sub that we've worked with closely for several years, and we worked it out together. Another instance for a school project, we got in a room together with the sub, the rough carpenter, the owner's rep, ourselves, and work through an equal agreement to try to make it happen. Yes, there was a change order, but we tried to make it fair for everybody. No one wants to get hurt through this whole process, and if we can try to work together and come up with good solutions, we'll do our best.
Now, Ken, do you think consumers rather will stop paying these prices and just put their projects on hold?
Well, we've already seen quite a decline in non-residential projects. I have a slide that shows figures from the Census Bureau on what they call a value put in place. That's a measure of construction spending on projects underway. And this set of bullet points compares the total spending in the first 4 months of 2021 to the first 4 months of 2020. The top line, the first words look pretty good. Total construction spending up 6%. But as soon as you peel back the layers of that onion, you see huge differences. Private residential, whether you're talking about new single or multifamily, or don't have it in here, but the third piece is what the census calls improvements, additions and renovations to owner-occupied, all up by strong double-digit percentages. But the private non-residential down by nearly double-digit, and the public construction starting to fade after having held up well a few months ago. And then the rest of that table shows everything in the red, meaning all of the non-residential spending categories, public and private combined, down in year to date, first 4 months of 2021 versus first 4 of 2020. Within those categories, there are a few bright spots: primary and secondary school construction and reconstruction. These two combine the renovation with the new construction. So we're getting HVAC systems and barriers put in existing K through 12 school buildings, classrooms built outside, and as home building picks up, new schools in areas that haven't had one. Warehouse construction certainly doing very well. Data centers, although it's not broken out by the Census Bureau, everybody says those are going gangbusters. But most project types have already been slowed. And you asked about what are owners doing now. We've had limited evidence that owners have been putting projects off, but if they start to see more of these bid prices going way up, or reassessment of a GMP, as Mark mentioned, because they didn't lock in that price 18 months ago as they should have, then they may say, whoa, let's back off, let's not do the project or scale it back.
So obviously we don't want to see that happen. We don't want to see our projects or anyone's projects go on hold. What needs to happen in order for material cost escalation to slow down?
Well, the escalation is the result of a number of factors. But one, I mentioned tariffs. We've been lobbying the White House to get rid of those. They are not working in terms of improving domestic supply. They're just pushing up prices, and they're hurting a lot of businesses, a lot of small contractors, subcontractors that can't get materials or have to buy them at a price that they hadn't planned on. And certainly it's interfering with the administration's hopes for getting a lot more infrastructure and affordable housing built. But in addition, and I think Mark could probably say more about this, it's really important for contractors to be in close touch with their suppliers and with owners so that everybody in the supply chain knows as quickly as possible what the current situation is and what the outlook is.
You're exactly right. That's what we're trying to do. We run all of our projects lean, so we're getting closer to the suppliers than we were previously, making sure that we're getting firsthand knowledge from them and writing some POs directly to secure materials early in projects. Trying to get things and warehouse them either on site or in a warehouse. Getting the materials is hard, and then just locking in that price. It's a gamble. People keep thinking that prices have to come back down, and that may not necessarily be the case. It hasn't been the case thus far. So we're trying to just cover ourselves and protect our owners to make sure that the contracts that we write hold up at the end of the day.
Well, that's great, and that's certainly consistent with what AGC has been recommending, that there's no one solution to this, but if you can get hold of those materials early on, if you have a place to store them safely, if you're confident that the quantities and the specs are what you'll wind up needing, then that's certainly one solution. Another, we have a set of documents called consensus docs that includes a form people can use to allow for price adjustments after the contract is signed. But getting an owner to agree to that may not be easy. Getting to agree on what the base price, the index, if you will, and how much of that has changed, how rapidly, and how much of the cost should be shared by the owner. Those are all complex things to decide in the course of negotiation. But we do have a lot of resources at AGC of America, and I'd be glad to share those.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're sorry, Jess. We are doing some of those things as well. We're working with our architect. You mentioned specs. Trying to get submittals approved quickly. Reorganizing the procurement schedule to get those long lead items and those items that are driving up in price before it gets too late. And then also we're looking for alternative materials. If something's not readily available here, let's try to value engineer it and keep an open mind, get something that's of equal quality, that's going to work, that we can get our hands on so it doesn't hold up the project at the end of the day.
Right. And, I just want to switch gears slightly. Each week, there seems to be a new material that's in short supply, and it's impossible for anyone to get their hands on quickly. What is making the supply chain such a disaster, and what's been the biggest surprise?
Well, from my standpoint, it's been a number of things. First, we were hearing about the ships off the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach stacked up because they couldn't get wharf space. Now, apparently, that has eased a little bit, but the containers are piled up on the docks waiting for trains to haul them inland. And there's been a big shortage of truck drivers all over the country. So whether you're trying to get something shipped from a port or from a producer or even from a nearby warehouse, there can be problems getting those deliveries. A lot of it does date back to COVID in different ways. And eventually these things will work out, but I don't hear any confident predictions of how soon, unfortunately.
Mark, what are we having trouble procuring?
Well, the biggest one right now is honestly steel bar joists. It's those things that you don't think will ever go out of stock. Bar joists were always there, but now there's so many warehouses being built. Amazon is the single largest purchaser of steel bar joists in the country. They're buying up a third of the facilities to be able to get us our little brown boxes easier every day. So it's a bit of a pain point, but we work through it. So we're trying to think of creative ways and building in other methods using light gauge framing or switching to wood or prefabbed buildings, things like that can work and keep a project on schedule for our clients, because they still want to have their building when they want to have their building, and we have to try to deliver for them.
Right, exactly. And Ken, I'm going to quote you on something. You wrote that officials at all levels of government should review all regulation, policies, and enforcement actions that may be unnecessarily driving up cost and slow importation, domestic production, transport, and delivery of raw materials, components, and finished goods. What is the likelihood of that happening?
Well, I wish I could say that we've had success in getting the tariffs repealed, but so far no sign of that. And some other measures looking at trucking hours of service or ways of easing congestion at ports. Also, no progress. The federal government is hearing from groups like AGC. I got to talk to the chief economist on Vice President Harris's staff and chief economist of the Commerce Department and people in the National Economic Council staff a couple of weeks ago. But the actual decision makers, the president and the cabinet, they're not yet showing signs of being willing to ease the supply chain. So this is going to be a continuing struggle to make sure that the federal government can be more responsive.
It's interesting to hear about that on a national scale, but go ahead, Mark. I was going to ask for your opinion.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to ask Ken, do we know, are similar countries running across the same problems that we are, or are they in better shape than the U.S. right now?
Yeah, it really varies. One reason we're having trouble is the good news side, that we've done a lot better at growing our economy. Many other countries are still in shutdown or just coming out of it. And the U.S. has had a record high 1/4 increase in economic output. That was in the third quarter of last year, but continued very strong. The forecasts are that we'll have the strongest growth in gross domestic product since 1984. So there is a lot to celebrate, but it does come with pain and adjustments.
So let's top this off. I'm interested to hear what both of you have to say. In the short term, how do OAC teams mitigate these risks together?
Well, Mark, I'll let you take that first.
Okay, so it's about partnering. It starts with, you have to have a common goal going into a project. So contractors need to know what their owners want. What's going to define a job as being successful? Is it being on schedule, on budget, making sure the program's complete? I mean, obviously the answer is yes to all these, right? So how do we make that happen? It starts with a good planning process, working through procurement, materials, understanding, having a good dialogue throughout it. If you hear about something, speaking up quickly. If you know that roofing's going to be a problem on the job, should we change what the roofing material is? If you're having a hard time getting steel bar joists, should this be rolled sections? How do you tweak the building design to give the owner the program that they need at not much of a premium, and hopefully none actually, and make sure that you can hold it through construction. These projects take a long time to build. Can you plan it well enough to expedite the building process to alleviate any future escalation and things like that? What can you do? What can we do to buy materials early that there's a threat of things, but there's so many unknowns right now. That's the tricky part. It might be is a set of screws that or doorknobs that are going to be hard to get next. So just trying to keep contractors need to keep in tune with suppliers, see what they're running low on, what's being bought up quickly by somebody before it goes too late. We don't want a toilet paper problem like we had across the country here, where all of a sudden people are fighting to get rolls of toilet paper. It's something that you never thought would go out of stock. But here we are, fighting for little things like that in like roof insulation and bar joists for building materials. So it's being proactive at the end of the day, trying to do what you can and being open with your clients. So that's it. Ken, what are your thoughts?
Well, very well said. All I can add to that is that AGC provides a lot of information that we hope is useful to all sides. For instance, we've done 2 editions now of what we call the Construction Inflation Alert, which is a simple document meant to educate owners, officials, and others about what's been happening with the costs and supply chain. I expect we'll be updating that again later in June or in July. I write a weekly 1-page summary of economic news relevant to construction called the Data Digest. And every week this year, I've been including examples of materials that have gone up in cost or of new supply chain issues. So these are ways that contractors can educate themselves, can provide third-party information to owners that hopefully they can trust, and also maybe help them figure out ways that they can do workarounds or alternatives. And then we also have, as I mentioned, a suite of documents called Consensus Docs that has been developed by AGC in conjunction with owner and subcontractor and supplier groups to provide a balanced set of documents that don't favor one party to the harm of another. And so at the end of this, we'll provide a slide that shows how to get hold of that information. But hopefully those things can help, along with the very specific ideas that Mark enunciated.
Ken, thank you so much. I know I learned a lot today. And just to quickly recap, our Industry Tidbits, this is our first one that we've recorded. And, today I think we've learned a lot. And that is that the supply chain disruptions and material cost escalation is at an all-time high. Materials that used to be in great abundance are now nearly impossible to procure. And I think what we've learned is that the AEC industry needs to work together. So owners, architects, subcontractors, everyone just needs to be proactive and try and beat this. It'll come to an end soon, as Ken is hoping and said. So hopefully that can happen. But
right.
I think that we've all learned at least a little bit of the behind the scenes of this right now. Mark, thank you for being here today with us. It's always a pleasure. If anyone's interested in reaching out to Mark, you can reach him at mbeckler@cefloyd.com.
Thanks, Jess. It was great being here today. Ken, thank you so much. I really learned a lot, as always, from you. So definitely subscribe to his newsletter. It's a big part of what I do every week. So
subscribe to the Data Digest at store.agc.org or email Ken Simonson directly at ken.simonson@agc.org.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode of Industry Tidbits and discovered something to build on. Be sure to like, share, and follow us. We look forward to providing you more tidbits next time. And until then, take what you've learned and let's build on this.